Welcome to this webinar, Unlocking Innovation Startups Voice. This webinar is hosted by the FFA, and the topic of the Forum for the Future of Agriculture is Meeting the Food and Environment Challenge. And the future of the Forum for the Future of Agriculture is delighted to welcome 4 young entrepreneurs with a working startup in the agriculture or environmental sector who are willing to share their experience with us and who are here with us today. They are agile businesses, small young businesses growing very fast, and they're delivering alternatives through innovation and new perspectives. We're more than delighted to give a platform to you today to listen to you and to get inspiration from your point of view and your expertise. Just a quick notice to the participants: this session will be recorded, and should you have any questions to the speakers, please don't hesitate, just put the questions into the Q&A box, and I'm more than happy to come back to them. And so much for from the organizational point of view. I would love to give the stage to the first speaker, Alfonso Ballerini Chico de Guzman. I apologize for the horrible pronunciation. And I wanted to ask whether you could briefly introduce yourself and also your mission.
Hello, Marie-Christine. Thank you very much for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to be. And well, my name is Alfonso. You pronounce it very well, indeed. And I live in the southeast of Spain, and I farm in this area that is dry generally and cold in the winter, hot in the summer. It's a plateau over 1,000 meters over sea level, and we do organic farming and what we call regenerative farming practices as well. That is the short introduction, but I can extend it as much as you want.
Please do. You have around 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. So in here, what we had about 10 years ago, it was monoculture of barley and oats, and we've been diversifying it into other crops. So we've been diversifying into other crops, more perennials, because this climate is not the best suited for grains. We still maintain about 40% of the land with grains, and we've been planting a lot of almond trees and pistachio trees and a lot of aromatic plants like sage, rosemary, and then we have all of it is rain-fed, which is quite we are very proud of it, given the circumstances that we have an average of 300 millimeters of rainfall, of which many times 100 can be in one day. So we have to many times deal for the whole year with just about 200 things like that. And then we have a very small part where we have a little bit of fruit trees, mainly apple trees, and some vegetables, and also a small vineyard. So in the farm, besides farming, what we also do is we host a couple of different projects. I say we host because me as the farm manager, and in this case I'm the son of the owner of the farm, I don't manage those projects. They collaborate with each other and they collaborate with the farm, but they are independent. So one of them is an academy that receives students from all over the world, generally from other parts of Europe, and they do the research and master thesis with topics that they're interesting for them and interesting for us, regarding a lot of the different practices we do in the farm, like how to prevent erosion, monitoring the different techniques to see if that improves the soil fertility, how that affects the crop yields and production, how the ponds and the hedges of different plants affect the biodiversity on the farm, how does that affect at the same time the pollination of the almond trees, and things like that. So it's a mutually beneficial relationship, I would say. And then we have other projects like a small winery that makes natural wines that established here a year and a half ago. And then that person makes her wine in this facility. and she uses some of our grapes and some of the grapes of other places. Then we have also a project of volunteers. It's called the Ecosystem Restoration Camp, where volunteers come to help doing reforestations in the winter and autumn, and then summer and spring. They are busy maintaining those reforestations. Generally, the first year we have to irrigate them a bit to give them a higher chance of survival. And we have also a group of people that they have a communications agency, and they decided they wanted to live in the farm instead of in Madrid, and they work for different projects in the area, and also they help us out with the communication, and they help the academy, and they help the winery, and they help others. So in the end, it's getting quite circular. And we have also just freelance people. One guy, he's a friend since we were little. He's a smith and makes sculptures, and he lives here and has his space. And other things we do besides these practices of focusing not only on the yields but also on improving the water, the soil, and the biodiversity in the farm. We try to use as much as possible our own things. So we have some sheep and some cows, and we try to reuse the manure, to compost it, to add it back to the crops. We just started a project of vermicompost as well, that we use all the food scraps from the kind of little village of all the people we are living in the farm, and the compost from the animals, and use it there as well, to then feed it back to the soil for the crops. And now we are in a project to make a distillery for the aromatic plants we have, because now we already have a decent production of a bit more than 50 hectares of aromatics, and we want to increase a bit more. And the idea is that with the almond shells that we have from our production, that we can use it for the burner to distill the aromatics that is normally in the summer when the distillation happens. And then that same burner can be used in September to help the almond dryer also dry the almonds, especially the wet days when we cannot just dry them with the sun, and also to heat up all the houses in the village. We also try like the scraps, like the waste of the crops, like the apples and the vines, to also give it to the cows. Then we eat the cows, and that's more or less a summary of what's going on. I didn't say that the farm is about 1,100 hectares in total. So it sounds like a big farm, but in this area, you need to have quite a minimum amount of hectares to be able to make a living from farming, because the yields are not very big.
It sounds fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing with us. I love the multitude of projects you have going on at the same time. And as you mentioned already, it's already becoming quite circular. So I think that's something we can definitely discuss a bit later. Thank you so much. I think at this point, we'll jump to our second speaker, Mr. Sven Neufkens, and with Fruitbox at Work. Sven, I'm so delighted you're here, and very excited to hear about your mission. And would be wonderful if you could introduce yourself as well, and also introduce and show your mission to the participants.
Yeah, hello. Welcome to the greenhouse of Spelien Strawberries. I'm Sven Neufkens, 30 years old, and manager of Spelien Strawberries, Marais, and Fruitbox at Work. First of all, thank you for inviting us to this online forum. It's a great honor for us to enjoy this. I will introduce ourselves shortly. Spelien is a company that produces environment-friendly strawberries since 2017. The name Spelien comes from my name, Sven, and my wife's name, Evelien. We have 5,000 square meter strawberries here. We produce every year 50,000 kilos delicious strawberries. For this cultivation, we use only rainwater and the solar. The solar we use for heating our greenhouse and make energy, the electricity for our company. We market all our strawberries by ourselves, so we are not associated with a corporation, so we can be sure of a fair price of our products. We pack all our strawberries in cardboard, no more plastic anymore. It's more environment friendly. Also, we don't use insecticides in this greenhouse. We buy good insects to fight the bad one. We also use yellow sticky traps to monitoring our greenhouse for looking which insects here are. We sell our strawberries to our vending machines. We have 14 machines of them. And we put these vending machines in different villages around our company. All our strawberries are sold with a radius of 15 kilometers, so local sales to the consumers. In addition to direct selling to the consumer and friendly cultivation, food waste is also an important point in our policy. So we don't have food waste while the production and also during the distribution. Because the consumer, we can also offer small strawberries, and as long as the taste and the quality is good, the consumer is satisfied. I have also another company, Marais. It's a company that sell free-range eggs. We have 500 chickens around our farm here. We have a lot of grass and meadows around our greenhouse. So the chickens cuts our grass and we don't use the machines for cutting the grass. I need to say more. The chickens eating also our strawberries. The strawberries were not not good for available for selling. We give them to the chickens, so there's no waste of our strawberries. And these eggs we sell also in a vending machine here at the farm. This is a short presentation what we do here in Belgium.
It sounds fantastic, and I love the local focus. I'm also very impressed by the size of your farm.
Thank you.
5,000 square meters sounds like a lot. Of what I've heard, you're also growing strongly. So I think that's super, super interesting. And thank you so much for presenting this and your mission. And after having heard your exciting insights, I think we're going to jump to Karin Beukel with Agren. And Karin, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm very excited to hear about your startup, and we all are. And please introduce yourself and your mission and what it is all about.
Yeah, so hi everyone, my name is Karin Beukel and I'm one of the co-founders of Agren by Circular Food Technology. And we started the company based on 4 different challenges that we see going on right now. So generally we feel that the food system is broken and that we need to change this. First of all, we see that 1/3 of all food produced is never consumed. It's simply going to waste. We experience that more than 800 million people are suffering from hunger. And at the same time, we have huge amount of people that are also obese. And then finally, what we do is that we overconsume our planet every year. So what we believe in circular food is that upcycling is really the way of solving some of these issues, or a part of that. So building a more circular food system where waste is not part of it. So upcycled food, just to give you the definition, it's the use of ingredients that would otherwise have not gone into human consumption. Often we see it going to feed, but resources that are procured and produced using verifiable supply chains, and that has a positive impact on the environment. And more specifically, what we work on is brewer-spent grains. So the brewer-spent grains is the mashed and malted grains that has been used for beer production or whiskey production or schnapps production. So, and there's 40 million tons of brewer-spent grains available globally. So what we know by now is that actually, if we were to convert these side streams from the breweries into human food, we could actually cover 10% of the calorie deficit that we will be facing in 2027, according to WHO. So it's really a huge potential of using these industrial side streams. And what we do is we take the brewer-spent grains, which is a biological material. It's 80% moisture, and we split it into two different parts. We have a liquid fraction and a dry fraction. The dry fraction we make into flour, and the flour we produce is high on proteins, 20% actually, and high on dietary fiber, so 50% dietary fiber. And that's because in the brewing industry, you use the sugars, but you don't use the rest of the grains. So what is left is really the parts that's really good for human consumption. So the vision we have is we want to disrupt the food system. We want to turn it into a more circular system. And we want to do that by upcycling the brewer-spent grains. Where are we right now? We're a company that's, it's 3.5 years since we started. We set up a production site in Denmark where we upcycle around 3 tons of brewer-spent grains every day. And we turn it into the flour, and then we placed 13 products on the market in the retail. So we launched in Denmark at the same time as Corona hit. So we were planning to go into on-trade and work with food service and industry, but because of Corona, we shifted and we placed the products on the retail market. And what we've done so far is we've proven that upcycled goods is something that the consumers, they want to purchase. And now we are developing it into more of industrial ingredients, and then also to sell the concept of setting up local productions globally in the future. That's our plan. So brewer-spent grains, it's not only good for the planet, it's also a very feasible business. So right now, a ton of brewer-spent grain is sold. If it's sold for biogas or for feed, it has the value of approximately 20 euro. When we turn it into flour and this plant liquid, it has a value of 800 euro for the same ton. So clearly it's not only good for the environment and for the climate, because we also use less CO2 in converting it into flour and drinks than alternative products. We base our business on 3 different pillars: technology, innovation, and scalability. And the technology we've applied for 2 patents. In terms of innovation, we work in open innovation networks, both with universities and with commercial partners. And then we build a scalable solution that can both be scaled up and scaled down. And our plan is really to build either through a licensing model or a joint venture model throughout the world, that productions can be set up locally. So we are not planning on exporting brewer-spent grains between countries and so on. No, we want to make local models that work for the local environment. What is very interesting about brewer-spent grain is also that it has a lot of variety in terms of the flavors. So what we can also make is flavors that are very interesting for chefs and for bread producing companies, because they can get flavor into the flours. So we have dark flours that has aroma components originating from, for example, stout or porter beer. And there you get also these chocolate flavors into the flour. So it's not only healthy, it also has a lot of interesting aromas. So in essence, our company was set up in 2018-19. We spent on building the production plant, testing the technology, applying for patents, and so on. 2020, we launched in B2C because it was the only open channel back then. In 2021, we've been validating the business case, and here in 2022, we're really looking into scaling with international partners, and we're currently setting up collaborations in several different countries. So we're really very much looking for partners across the world. So finally, what we want to do is to be part of solving the global climate challenge. We'll do that by securing that we are upcycling these huge amounts of grains that would otherwise have gone into feed or waste. We want to reduce the global land use for food production. So for example, for 1 kilo of wheat flour, the average square meters used globally is 4 square meters. So we can also save a lot of land by upcycling the grains, the barleys or the sorghum used for beer production. And then, of course, we want to offer these highly nutrient products to the market where we can secure proteins and dietary fibers across the world. So that was the short presentation of what we're doing.
It sounds absolutely fascinating. I'd be delighted to hear even more about it. I don't know how you all feel, but I feel like that was super interesting. Thank you so much for sharing, Karin. It's for your insights. I think we'll have a lot of questions later on in discussion as well on your business model. Let's jump to the fourth participant, Santiago Santos Valle with Lupolo Cantaleon. Again, apologize for my horrible pronunciation. Santiago, the stage is yours. And yeah, please introduce yourself and your mission.
Thank you, Maria Christine. My name is Santiago. I'm from Spain, and I'm representing here this small venture project called Lupulos Cantaleon. We're also on the beer value chain, but on the side of suppliers. We produce hops for craft brewing industry and retail them as well. The idea of this business started when we also detected there was a gap and a problem in the hops production in Spain, because it's mainly focused on the industrial demand from high commercial breweries. But the craft brewing industry had the problem that they rely on the supply from hops from mainly USA or Germany, at least in Spain. So we saw that this product can be grown in the area where we are, which is in León, and is the hops production area of Spain. And the varieties that craft breweries demand, they can be grown successfully in our area. So this was the seed of the idea. And then it got more complex. We are 3 persons, 3 co-founders. I'm the commercial manager for the project. And we are all agricultural engineers, but with no farming background. So we started from scratch. We are learning every day by making mistakes mainly. But anyway, we are moving on, and we are now in the stage of production. And this year we should be the first round harvest, because the hops takes time to produce, about 5 years. Well, our aim from the beginning was to differentiate the product and give it a fair value, because we see that the farmers in our area, they are getting a very reduced price for the product. And also the practices they do, they don't have much sense in the long term. So we want to kind of be the trigger for a change somehow by starting to try new things and innovate in farming and also the way of retailing. So we also do direct retailing of our hops, and we have a network of breweries who are interested in our product. And we are one of the first organic certified farms of hops in our area. So this is one of the, let's say, the souls of our project. We want to change things. We want to bring also a bit of life to our rural landscape, because it's really aging a lot, and farmers who are retiring in hops production, they're not finding a replacement in the youth. So I want to prove that it's possible to produce this product, which also has a lot of cultural implications, at least in our area. That it's possible to do it in a better way and getting a reward, and also while taking care of the environment that we are living in. And for that, we did, of course, the organic, but also we introduced new practices in terms of taking care of the soil. Also, we trying to fight pests by having hosting flora for getting pests that will also be defending our crop. And we also have a good collaboration with institutions and university. We host master students for the thesis. Also, we have hosted some craft brewers in our plantation and things like that. So we're trying to open this crop to the public. And basically what we want to do is to be like the pilot for all the farmers in the area, so they can be encouraged to change the production, and also we will have them to retail the product at a fair price, because we have the connection of the network of breweries that they lack, because they just produce and they sell it to a large retailer, and the price they have is under contract that is renovated only every 3 years. So you can imagine this year how much they will struggle when the costs are rising so much. And as I said, yeah, with first try, we then recommend. And we also have a lot of ideas that we want to develop in the near future. But in that we're looking for partners for, especially with the waste management, because the product that we produce, it generates a lot of waste in terms of every year harvest. All the harvest residues, unfortunately, we cannot compost them because they may host fungi, so we need to burn it. And we think it's a huge waste. So we are trying to find a way to reuse this huge amount of organic matter in a way that we can incorporate it again in our crops. But for that, we need like a proper research. And unfortunately, our institutional sector is quite static. So we need to push them a little bit or get additional help. And yeah, I think that's all for now. Thank you.
Sounds fantastic. I'm really I also love how you point out the challenges regarding food waste in your case, which I think is a beautiful example. And I think also a very nice opener for our discussion, because what we've seen here now for entrepreneurs at very different stages regarding food waste. And at this point, I would also invite all the participants, and also should you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask them. We're starting straight into the discussion, and now is your chance to start this discussion and to speak to those entrepreneurs who are joining us. So when we're starting this discussion, I have one question, the general question to kick off this discussion, and it's regarding the actions you have already taken towards food waste. I know we have 4 different startups here, and they're very different stages, but if you could just briefly summarize it, that would be absolutely wonderful, and we can get started to discuss the individual contributions toward food waste. And I would suggest that we go in the same order, so it would be wonderful. Alfonso, if you could just briefly outline the experience you have made so far with food waste and where you are at the moment.
Yeah, so part of the food waste that in our case is mainly a small part of the, it's not too much because it comes from the grapes and from the apples, which we don't produce that much compared with the other crops. It goes to the cows. Then from the people living in the farm, it goes to either the chickens if it's not a lot, or the cows as well. And what we do is, it's not really a food waste, but it's like a sub product in the case of the shells of the almonds. That is what we are planning on getting this burner, so we can use turn it into energy for heating the houses, running the distillery, and drying up the almonds.
So I would say it's pretty much circular already at basically at La Junquera, right?
Well, once we have that burner running, it will be quite circular, but we don't have it yet because it costs quite some money and we needed to make some savings. So I think with the harvest of this year, then our plan is to build it this winter to have it ready for next summer. So for summer 2023, it should be up and running.
Fantastic! It sounds amazing. And Sven, what is your input on food waste, and where do you stand at the moment regarding food waste?
Food waste. The strawberries who are deformed and not the first class strawberries, we sell these to people who making jam. The strawberries who not good for selling, we give them to the chickens. The chickens eat these strawberries. Also the strawberries who are not sold, we give them also to the chickens. The chickens give us eggs, and the eggs who are too small for selling, we sell these to the butchers for making to preparations their products. So here at our farm is there no food lost there.
Brilliant. So you would also say you're pretty much using all the waste at the moment already efficiently?
Excuse me?
So you would say you're using the waste already quite efficiently. You're happy with how you're using the waste which got generated? Yes.
We are very happy with working with our chickens. It's new this year. It's a great success, and the people around the village here are very happy with this the concept which we're working.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Karin, I feel like as you're already very deep in that area, I think your entire business is about food waste, right?
That is correct, yeah. So everything. So of course, depending on whether you call it food loss or food waste or how you define it, yeah. But the brewer spent grains can be defined as food waste, and that's the resource of our business, yeah. So definitely. But I think one of the interesting things of working with these industrial waste streams from larger players is that there's a huge variation, because every time if you build a model on somebody else's waste or waste that is not your own, yeah, you really need to have a different type of relationship with these other companies. So I really think that that's one of the major issues that we need to solve in the future, is to build closer relationship between the ones that can solve food waste issues from large industrial corporations, and then the ones with the ideas of how to deal with it. I can hear Sven and Alfonso and Santiago, they have really good solutions, but maybe if they were also to supply these solutions to other producers, it would be a different thing, yeah, where close collaborations is needed.
So how would you say provide information? How do you do it already? How, if you're getting waste from other companies, how do you get the information?
So it's really about dealing with the waste as a proper food ingredient, yeah. So you need to have full traceability. You need to understand every aspect of the resource that you get. So when we work with breweries and we pick up their spent grains, we know the exact recipes of what they've been using for brewing their beer. So normally when you discard food waste, you don't do it in those type of details, but that's really the level that you need to go to understand also the variations.
Fantastic. And I was wondering actually, Santiago, as you were saying, you actually have this challenge to deal with waste. What would you say to for example, like what is your take on food waste?
Well, I kind of picked the ball from Karin. Like we are already trying to teach some farmers about how to reduce the losses of organic matter. Like we have established a cover crop, and this cover crop we have to trim it, I don't know, in summer more often than in winter, but we just leave it there. It's organic matter that is generated by the soil and stays in the soil. We don't take it out. But the main challenge with hops is this organic matter that generate as a harvest residue, because out of the plant that grows 6 meters every year, you only pick up maybe 15% of organic matter that you are creating. The rest, it goes to waste. And this is a big challenge that we have, and we want to do that, to do something about it, because it's not sustainable by any means. And even if you burn it, then it's even worse, because it's creating all these emissions of ashes. So we think that if a way is found to compost this, for example, that you can generate a lot of value. Maybe you cannot reuse it in your farm, but maybe you can sell it as a fertilizer, or use it as fertilizer in other type of crops that you may have in your farm. And one issue that we have is, for example, we are organic certified, and we use the ropes that we use for the hops to climb. They are made of vegetable fiber, but the conventional farmers, they use plastic fiber. So they have a problem there, because they will mix green matter with plastics. So there's a lot of things to change there. We want to show them that it's possible, because we have been using it already for 3 years in our pilot plots, and these ropes are no problem. They will just decompose after a while. It's just some extra additional fiber that we have in the soil. So it's like small things that we are doing little by little to limit basically the organic matter losses, because we are not talking about food product. What we are selling is once you harvest, what you don't really lose matter. You lose humidity because you have to dry, but then what you harvest is mainly what it goes in. Maybe you have 10% of loss in the processing, but that's it. It goes to the brewer, and the brewer uses it fully, like all the way that it gets. So maybe it's a different angle for the waste. It's more like on the production part rather than in the use part.
Absolutely. Also, please feel free to directly respond if you have any ideas regarding or feedback to Santiago. Otherwise, I would straight go in a question, which I've realized when I talk, listen to you 4 different stories, and please feel free, whoever wants to join is. So when you think of all the problems having been presented right now and the challenges you have at the moment, would you say that you need more support from governments in terms of policies? Because I mean, for example, Alfonso, you already said you just made some savings, and then as soon as you have them, you will actually implement it yourself. But would you also, for example, like if there was a subsidiary, do you think it would have like fastened the process for you? Or do you think you need do you think you need a fund, or do you think you actually will just totally do it yourself?
Well, of course, I'm going to do it anyway, but if there would be a subsidy, I would definitely have done it maybe last year. So, and if I do it, I'm going to do it next year, it will be with savings and with the bank as a partner, which we do often. So I think if there would be a subsidy, yeah, indeed, things would be faster. And it would help. But I think we would not do things really differently. We would just do the same, but indeed, maybe faster would be the only change.
So mainly faster, but so basically you just, what you would actually need is subsidiary. Do you need any other policies? Do you think also policies would increase the speed?
Well, yeah, it is, policy-wise, I don't know if we mean the same things. Is policy or regulations? Like, for example, the regulations.
Yeah, regulations, exactly. So if are being made.
It's difficult to follow all of them. So I must say that some things we do, I don't know if the regulations tell us we should do it exactly that way. For example, the way of composting ourselves, like you're very limited on the ways you can compost. So it's difficult to follow exactly the policies 100% all the time. They are very strict, and at least in this area, I think people have not innovated that much in the dryland part with either crops or different activities. So many times kind of whatever is not specifically approved is kind of not allowed, or at least that's how a lot of authorities perceive it. So yeah, that is sometimes a bit of a challenge. But I think because of what we do generally is we don't do anything too strange or like anything that you say, oh wow, that looks bad. I think a lot of it is quite common sense. So far they've always allowed us to do it, and sometimes they've changed some regulations because we've asked it, because I said, hey, what we do seems to be kind of illegal, but as you can see, it makes a lot of sense that, oh, that is true, and then they've changed that regulation in a local way. But it's difficult to be all the time involved in that.
And Karin, I've just seen you nodding along. And what is your take?
So first of all, I think there are some very clear measures that you can use from a regulatory perspective. So put some tax on CO2 emissions. It's a clear one that will have huge influence straight away. The ones that are making the largest problems, they should also be carrying the largest cost because it has a huge cost on our planet. Second thing, it would be very interesting if companies like the 4 of us that are very green by DNA and looking into circular models and not creating any waste, if we could have some opportunities for different types of loans than other startups. Because some of the choices that we made in the early years are more costly, simply because we're not taking easy solutions. We are trying all the time to make the best solutions, not only for corporations, but we're trying to take the full planet into consideration. And I think that should be supported, and it could be supported by giving access to easier types of loans or so on from government. As a startup, at least as an industrial startup like mine, it's pretty hard to get bank loans in the beginning because it's a huge investment. then of course regulating against food waste or any type of waste going on along the process would be interesting. So what I experience now is that a lot of also large industrial clients, they contact us and ask us, can you help with this waste or with this waste or this loss along the industrial process? And yes, we would love to do that, but right now we're focusing on spent grain share in the beginning. But what I see is that there's a need for also putting the fingers on that and saying that it's not okay to waste resources when they can be used in a good way. Also, like Sven has explained in his case of how to use everything. Yeah. So it could be very, very good if there were some sort of also support and regulation towards not accepting this, because we cannot just, it's one of the biggest scams in the world. We're producing a lot of food and 1/3 of it is never consumed. You know, that's just a scam, and we're spending so much CO2. 8% of all CO2 in the world is spent on growing food that is never put in the mouth. You know, that's just insane. So, and then lastly, but I do think that it could be good if we could also put more information-wise from the political sphere into understanding what, for example, upcycled or circular food systems are, because it's part of solving, you know, some of these climate challenges and producing sustainably. It's part of that, but it's kind of a hard story and a more difficult narrative for startups to be part of explaining. So I do think that also politicians and governments, they could be part of just explaining these simple ways of how we could grow the future instead of how we're doing it right now. But it's not, you know, it's putting a lot of burden on us startups to be part of explaining these more complex ways of dealing with the food system. So that's my 4 ideas of what the politicians could do.
Very interesting. I actually see 2 main themes. I don't know. Feel free to directly discuss with Karen. Otherwise, I will just quickly ask Sven. Sven, what is your take on Karen's stance?
Yeah, Karen have say it good. Food waste. How need to say that? I lost my text. Excuse me.
Never mind. No, well, we can just continue, because I've noticed something really interesting, Karen, when you just said it. You mentioned 2 themes, and I think actually one of our participants, I remember, I think it was Alfonso as well. I think education is a big topic as well. So you mentioned that education, basically you would like to have 2 types of policies. One, which is for loans, or like looking more at like sort of like making easier access to loans, which I think I completely agree with, because I mean, we're producing something which is for society, and it's a good for society. The second point, which I thought was quite interesting, that I'd be interested to hear your take on it as well, is education. I've heard it between the lines a couple of times. So do you think the consumer is ready for your businesses you have at the moment? Do you think it's strongly growing? Do we need more awareness? Should the awareness also be implemented and increased by the government itself? Because otherwise you will have to carry the mission by yourself, right?
Yeah. So for sure, if we could have support from ones with bigger muscles, it would be great. Yeah. What we see is that, of course, large players in the food industry is also going into these areas and also trying to communicate that it's needed. But there's a lot with food waste. If we see cultures across Europe, we see huge differences in whether just the idea of picking up the waste from a restaurant and taking it home, whether that is acceptable, whether using different parts of crops is acceptable, whether, like, how do you communicate about, you know, using food waste? So often when we explain it, we talk about upcycled food, or we talk about co-products or byproducts instead of food waste. And it's also just about making it sound a little bit more delicious, and that's part of it. We should remember that it's all, when we talk about food, it's all about taste, and it's all about making it interesting for the consumer to purchase it, and therefore taste is absolutely important. So, but it's it needs a lot of communication, and it's not solved yet because there's so little. There's so few products still on the market that are carrying kind of an upcycle label. So that's it could be great with, for example, also an association we have in the US. We have the Upcycle Food Association. If we had that in Europe as well, it could also accelerate our transformation, and we would be much quicker. But it does take a lot of investment, and building awareness is not that easy.
Absolutely. And maybe at this point, Alfonso, I know you have been you just completely took it over by yourself, right? I mean, you also have an education center, and you just decided to do it proactively yourself, right?
Sorry, Mary Christine, my Wi-Fi went off, and I just was able to connect back with the phone.
So we're just discussing government policies, and we all agreed on subsidies, and especially easier access to loans as we're green businesses, which I think absolutely makes sense. And then Karen brought us up this also really interesting idea that actually education might be a really important point as well. So educating consumer and getting support from governments on that. And the question also was whether the consumer is actually ready for your businesses. There might be even more growth. And the point was just to say that you actually, maybe you could tell the participants a little more about how you've already started doing that yourself, right?
Yeah, indeed. Education, I agree, is super important, not only of the people working in the farm, not only on the students that come and help us out, and we help them out in their thesis, but also indeed the clients so they learn a bit more about what we do, so they can also appreciate it. And we say, hey, if they support us by buying our products and paying maybe a bit higher than the normal price, is because they know that we invested back in all these returns that are not just economic ones, but also social and environmental and all the regenerative practices too. I don't know if that was the question.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And Santiago, what is your take on governmental policies? Is it also including easier access to loans and education, or is there something else you would like to add, or what do you think also should be done?
Well, in our case, since we are like a project who's starting things from scratch, we face a lot of difficulties because also we're trying to do things in a different way than it has been done. So all the policies are aimed to the traditional ways of farming, in particular hops. So we are facing a lot of challenges, including access to subsidies, because subsidies are angled for the traditional farming, not for the type of farming that we're doing, and also not for independent farms. So in that sense, we need to educate the administration, at least in our case, to tell them like there are different ways to do things, or at least just to be more flexible for new ideas. And maybe I think more than subsidies, sometimes what you need is incentives to change your way of thinking regarding farming. And I think that's also something that is really important. And also in terms of education, I think you can start already from high school. It's very important to make at least students and youth interested in farming. I mean, farming is a lovely profession. I love it, but it's really tough and it's not sexy right now. And that's why we have a lot of problems in Europe with aging farmers. So we need to show them that there are new things you can do. Like we are for different projects, we do different things, and we are doing very interesting stuff that need different set of skills. So we need to also bring this to high school and then to universities of agriculture or environmental sciences. I think this is I mean, regarding education, what can be maybe added to what has been said already.
Absolutely. Actually, Sven, at this point, I believe what you're doing as well, you're just directly getting into touch with the consumer. I think you just, not sure whether you're still here. I just saw you. But because Sven is actually interesting because he directly interacts with the consumer because he's not directly selling to companies. So he's already doing that directly and directly tackling this issue by addressing the consumer. I actually have one final question because I think we're already heading towards 7 o'clock. But what I'd be really interested to hear from you is maybe one final take on what are your current challenges. So what are you looking at the moment? Where are you? So sort of like last note to our participants of where you are at the moment, your biggest challenge, and where you would love to grow in the future. And we'll just start with Alfonso in the same row. So one last, what is your current biggest challenge? Something you would like to leave with the audience to think about?
Well, I think our challenge is maybe financing, that we want to do maybe a lot of things, and we have to wait to be able to, like, we have X amount of money we can get from the profits of our harvest to be able to reinvest, and we can get X amount of credit from the bank to not get too much in debt. But yeah, there's a lot of things and a lot of projects going on that we would like to do, and yeah, we would like to be able to go faster and at a different speed, but we have to adapt to what we have. So I would say that's it. And many times I think banks also, some projects they don't think so long term as farming. So for some things, some projects are very important for a farm, that they could give you a new dimension, but maybe they don't give you a profit in 6 or 8 years. You cannot get back all the investment. And for other crops, yes, but for some crops take longer. And for some other project like buildings, for example, that in this case we want to expand the education center. But that's an investment that it takes some time. So we would need from 20 to 30 years to be able to pay the investment of the education center back. And when we tell that to a bank, they really don't agree with such a long thing. They say, talk to me 10 years, man. But 20 years, maybe we're all dead. That's way too long.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I absolutely agree. So basically, if we summarize in nutshells for you, it's basically long-term finance is your challenge. So the long-term thought, and to find that in the finance world, right? Fantastic. And Karin, what is your take? Karin, biggest challenge or something you would like to leave with the audience?
So I think from my perspective right now, we've had Corona, and because of Corona in 1 year, the hunger, people suffering from hunger in third world countries has increased by 60%. And now we see the war from Russia in Ukraine, and they are having 25% of the wheat production in the world is going on in Russia and Ukraine. So what I see now as the biggest challenge is that we need some speed in changing our food systems quite dramatically. Just 3 years ago, we were in a much better situation than we are today. Today, we're really facing food scarcity at a different level than what we would ever have imagined just 3 years back. So for me, this is about speed and about taking action now. And so that's really the greatest challenge is, how can we quickly get our technology across the globe and start using these spent grains that are wasted globally? That's like, we need to do it now, not tomorrow, not in a year. In a year, we will have a lot of refugees. We will have a totally different world situation. So we need to act now. So that's my,
your take.
Yeah, my take right now. I think it's quite frustrating and disturbing to really, when you look at the big numbers, we see some challenges that we will, I don't know how we will solve them, but we really need to do this in a collaborative manner to start producing more locally and to make solutions locally. Use the global solutions we have locally.
Absolutely. I also think that now we are more and more aware of the global scale with the current crises, which I think were the first ones where we actually saw a real global impact and scale of them. So yeah.
Yeah, and the food chains, they have been too long, and we've been sending around food across the globe, so we could get exactly what we wanted at the right time. That's not how we can do it in the future. We really need to make a change now.
Absolutely. And Santiago, what is your biggest challenge, and what is your message you would like to leave with the audience?
Well, like in particular for our project, the main challenge is the same as for Alfonso. Like access to funding is crucial, and we are still like kind of halfway on our initial stage. So we still need to put an effort from our pockets, because it's a completely self-funded project, and hops is a very capital-intensive crop. So yeah, access to funding is very challenging for us right now. But also we have an issue with regulations, because also it's a crop that is heavily regulated from already EU, has specific laws for how to grow and produce and process. So when you try to do things in a different way, you are facing all these walls, legal and institutional. So I think, yeah, as I said before, more flexibility or understanding from institutions would be really, really appreciated, especially for startups like us who are starting with crops that are so specific and so intensive. Yeah, I think that's right now. I mean, I could go on for long, but yeah, make it short. Those are the main two.
We still have a minute, so
it's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, if you have any last questions, don't hesitate to shoot now. I mean, if you have any questions, would like to connect, don't just go ahead and ask questions. Otherwise, I would like to thank you. But if you have any questions, just shoot them now. I'll just, yeah. Are there any final questions you would like to ask? Any last points? From what I see, no, it's also 7 o'clock, so it's perfect timing. Well, Alfonso, Karin, and Santiago, and also Sven, I think his Wi-Fi just failed. I think I've actually, yeah, his Wi-Fi is just not there anymore. Thank you so much for joining. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. I feel like we could have discussed this a lot longer, actually. So even though we had our presentations were shorter and we had like a half an hour to discuss, I feel like this was just the beginning. So thank you so much for this. It's been really, really insightful. Also, for the participants, if you'd like to speak to them, just join the startups on the day of the virtual stands. I think there's a link in the chat by my colleague, and don't hesitate to engage with them further, to reach out to them, and to make sure to follow up their stories. And also, in addition, tomorrow, a quick reminder at the end, the Forum for the Future of Agriculture is tomorrow. So if you haven't signed up for it yet, you can still sign up for it online. There's some really interesting discussions going onward tomorrow, and it would be absolutely lovely if you joined. Last but not least, a very big thank you from my side. It's been a pleasure to speak to you, also connect you before the event, and to now actually listen to your stories. I wish you best of luck. I think they're all brilliant business ideas. I can't wait to see where you are in a year or two. Also on a long-term scale in 10 or 20 years, as we're talking about bigger timescales here. And thank you so much for taking your time. I hope to see you very soon, and take good care. And thank you from all of us for joining today.